Mississippi.
From the Foundation Studio on Biloxi's Back Bay, welcome to Super Talk Outdoors, where we celebrate every single Monday at lunchtime the world-class outdoors of the state of Mississippi. Because, as I say every week, we are the capital of the outdoors in America, and we want to stay that way. That is for sure. Thank you for joining us on the powerful Super Talk Mississippi radio network or on Super Talk TV at C Spire TV. But a lot of you watch the show on YouTube or Facebook, or you listen on your favorite podcast. For that reason, I always give the date. It's March the 13th, 2023. Hey, listen, I'll start the show today with two quotes that apply greatly to what I'm going to discuss today. And they're quotes that I've shared before, but they're so important. The first one is from Nancy Newell, and she said this: conservation is humanity caring for the future. It's that short and sweet, but boy, is that true. It's about generational work. It's the work that we do for our kids and our kids' kids. And the second one from Aldo Leopold, which I couldn't think of a better person to quote based on what we're about to talk about. Conservation is a state of harmony between men and land. And if we're not careful, we will get out of harmony as it relates to that. And that's what I want to talk about today. Hey, listen, I had invited James Cummings from Wildlife Mississippi to join me today to talk about the latest on the Farm Bill. But then I learned about a really interesting meeting that's going to happen this week, a meeting of Deer Kings. And I want to talk to you about it. I posted this at the Super Talk Outdoors Facebook page, and thousands of people have already engaged with it. But here's what I said. The battle to stop the very few rich high-fence deer breeders in the state from becoming deer kings by making the sale of white-tailed deer legal in Mississippi, unfortunately, has only just begun. They seek to set Mississippi's conservation and wildlife management efforts back by moving away from the North American wildlife conservation model. Case in point, there's a meeting this week that has been called by the head deer breeder, Billy DeVinny. A lot of powerful people will be there, people directly involved in making this legal, or potentially making this legal. They will be wined and dined at the exclusive private Capitol Club in downtown Jackson, and they will hear only one side of the story. While House leadership not only killed two bills that would have made the sale of white-tailed deer illegal, they urged the Commission for the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks to delay considering any resolution. The general public has been mostly in the dark while these powerful people huddle. I'll say what I said before. The quickest way for this issue to be put to bed is for the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks Commission to pass a resolution banning the sale of white-tailed deer. Then next year, the legislature should slam the door shut on this issue once and for all. It's time for the outdoorsmen and women from across the state to get organized. Every hunting club, every conservation organization, and every individual in this state who believes that wildlife in this state belong to the people should come forward and let your voice be known. It's time to get organized, and then I added more to come. There's a lot I could say about setting this up, but I think the best way to for people who have not paid attention to this issue, this is a letter from a month or two ago signed by the CEO of the Boone and Crockett Club, the president and CEO of the National Deer Association, and the Mississippi Wildlife Federation. It kind of puts it in perspective for the most part. So here it is. Historically, public ownership of wildlife and the right to hunt them have been closely tied to rights to keep and bear arms. Because most Americans have always enjoyed widespread access to firearms, their ability to hunt and consume wild game has been enjoyed by people of nearly all economic and social classes, regardless of wealth or privilege. When dead wildlife were bought and sold generations ago, we nearly lost some of our most iconic species: white-tailed deer, wild turkey, wood ducks, and hundreds of species of birds that were sold for just their feathers. Deer, for example, had dwindled to only 1,500 animals throughout the state of Mississippi. Then state law prohibited the buying and selling of white-tailed deer. Up until recently, all of our attorney generals had agreed on this established law. However, a new opinion from the current Attorney General, Lynn Fitch, has concluded that the Commission, this is the Commission on Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks, could craft a regulation allowing for the commercial trade of white-tailed deer held within high-fenced enclosures between registered captive breeders without specifically contravening any express legislative act. Not only do we believe this conclusion was erroneous and contrary to Mississippi law and past Attorney General's opinions, we have significant concerns should the state and commission develop a regulation allowing the sale of deer. The sale of wildlife sets a dangerous precedent for the future of hunting and wildlife conservation in Mississippi, especially when it comes to infectious diseases like chronic wasting disease that threaten the future of our deer and deer hunting heritage. Because of CWD, we are already witnessing a reduction of deer, especially mature bucks, and hunting success in parts of the state. And I'll add to this, incidentally, by the way, don't think for a second this isn't a serious issue, because it is. The letter continues. At a time when putting food on the table is important to so many Mississippians, this Attorney General's opinion is also opposed by the majority of the 780,000 sportsmen and women across the state, most of whom support fair chase hunting and believe that wildlife should continue to belong to the people of our great state. Wildlife should not be up for sale to the highest bidder or the politically connected. We must ensure that our elected officials in Mississippi, from the governor who appoints the wildlife commissioners to the attorney general who interprets the wildlife laws, for example, protect our native wildlife and associated recreational economy, and the healthy native population of wildlife remain accessible for all Mississippians to enjoy. And then it goes on to say who has signed the letter. This is an extremely important issue. The fact that there's another meeting happening, I've been told by various parties, high-ranking people, I might add, they know who they are, for me to stop talking about this. They want me to stop talking about it. Meanwhile, the head Deer King, or Deer King wannabe, is wanting to have all these meetings with all these people behind the scenes to try to align folks, while the outdoors community sort of thinks that this is not an issue and we don't need to be focused on it. We need to be focused today more than we've ever been focused before. And as I said, I had invited James Cummings from Wildlife Mississippi to join me today to talk about the Farm Bill. And James is one of the country's foremost experts on conservation practices. He's written books about it, and he lives right here in Mississippi, and we're proud to have him. Let me welcome my friend James Cummings to Super Talk Outdoors. How you doing, James?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Ricky. It's good to be on the show.
It's good to see you. Hey, listen, I think a great place to start. We posted at Mississippi Whitetails this statement from Super Talk Outdoors this morning, and someone asked this question. I think it's a good question, and I think it's one we ought to tackle right out the bat. And here's the question: how does private sale of farm-raised white-tailed deer have a negative impact on the North American model of conservation? This is legal in multiple states where I am not aware of any conservation issues existing. Is there fact-based quality research and science that has found negative impacts of these deer farms? Now, James, let me just add before you answer the question that I had Robbie Kroger on from Blood Origins 2 weeks ago, and he said that when you look at the vectors of CWD across the nation, there is a lot of connections back to breeding facilities. So for someone to wonder, who's not aware of any conservation issues that exist, man, if you look at Texas, for example, it's a mess. There's been millions of dollars spent on legal fees. There's been Supreme Court rulings. It's a mess. We don't want Mississippi to be a mess, and we don't want our department to have to spend millions of dollars defending itself. Anyway, with that said, what's your thoughts on the answer to that question?
So you're exactly right. I mean, if you get back into looking at high fence operations, especially around the country where we're breeding cervids, whether it be elk or deer, yeah, we're seeing a much increased prevalence of chronic wasting disease. And the bad thing about CWD is there's no cure. And we're doing such a great job in Mississippi, thanks to our Department of Wildlife, thanks to private landowners, thanks to deer hunters. We're now in the top 10 states in terms of the Boone and Crockett record book with some of the largest deer. We've got a great trajectory, in terms of managing our populations well. And the last thing we need, is chronic wasting disease, putting a stick in our spoke, so to speak. And, you mentioned, I went and, I pulled this right here. This is a research paper that came out of Wyoming. And the title of it is Chronic Wasting Disease Drives Population Decline of White-tailed Deer. Last time I checked, Wyoming wasn't exactly a liberal state. so it's much like Mississippi in terms of a high percentage of people that like to deer hunt.
Hey, let's do this, James. Let's do this. We'll pick it up right there. Wyoming on the other side. We'll continue to talk about the very fact-based quality research that's been done that shows the negative impact of deer farms on states' ability to manage wildlife. Here we go with, we'll come back here in just a second with James Cummings. We'll see you after this break.
Mississippi, where a mockingbird sings out on his limb, whistling that sweet soul for him. I said 3 Mississippi to this land called home. I'll breathe Mississippi till I'm dead and gone. Just carry on, I'll carry on, Mississippi.
Leading the conversation on Mississippi's outdoors. It's Super Talk Outdoors with Ricky Matthews on Super Talk Mississippi.
Mississippi.
Welcome back to Super Talk Outdoors. As I said at the beginning of the show, I'm a little hot and bothered today, and we should be, because there's a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff happening in Mississippi that if you're a conservationist, if you're an outdoorsman, you ought to be incredibly concerned about it. When we went to break, we're talking about with James Cummings from Wildlife Mississippi, who's literally written the book about conservation in America. We're talking about some of the work that's been done in other states and what we've learned from other states about deer farms, so to speak. Anyway, let's come back to, you were mentioning Wyoming. What were you going to the point you were going to make, James?
Yeah, so if you look at the research that was conducted out of Wyoming, that research shows that affected populations where chronic wasting disease is in those populations, they're not sustainable where you have a high disease prevalence under current harvest levels. That is not what we want in Mississippi. If I look at our state statutes, we're to regulate high fences based on regulations that protect our native wildlife and protect our recreational economy. Hunting in Mississippi represents 34,000 jobs. Think of the times we call a special session in the legislature for less than 10% of that. That just shows the significance of this in terms of our recreational economy. It's a $3 billion industry as it is. We don't need things that can put those dollars, those jobs in I don't play golf, but I love to deer hunt. We don't need to put those types of things that Mississippians love to do at risk because a few people want to have it their way and really increase our chances of, you've got a very small percentage of the population want to do something that puts a huge percentage at risk. As Governor Barber once said, good policy makes good politics. Well, I'm going to take the reverse of that. Bad policy makes bad politics. So I don't know why we're even having this discussion.
That's what amazes me about this. This is an issue that the vast majority of outdoorsmen and women in this state would support and do support. In fact, those with high fence, I've heard from a lot of high fence owners, and they're upset about this, to be honest with you, because they don't want the focus to become about the high fence. They want, this is about deer breeding and about purchasing and transporting deers from deer breeding facilities to other high fence areas of Mississippi. It's a serious problem. You mentioned Governor Barber. I heard I got a call from him yesterday. We just called up, and I had the pleasure of writing the foreword to his book, America's Great Storm, Leading Through Hurricane Katrina. And, Governor Barber often said what you just said, that good policy makes good politics. That's why I'm so surprised that we're here. It seems so. This should be an election year issue that people would support. Instead, they're trying to diminish it so they give people like Billy DeVinny an opportunity to build a head of steam. I wonder why that is, James.
It's so many times in Mississippi, a state I dearly love, we seem to do things based on politics and not good policy. So it seems sometimes it's all about the next election, not about the citizens. So I'm hoping we'll get through that, at some point. Maybe we can, look, I don't want us to be number 50. I want us to be number 1.
Yeah, so James, Robbie Kroger from Blood Origin said on my show, he's defending hunting rights around the world. And he says of CWD in America, when he looks at the vectors, they often connect back, as I said earlier. But what he also says is that CWD could threaten hunting like nothing else. It could literally threaten our hunting heritage. That is real, isn't it?
That's 100% real. And Robbie is a PhD wildlife biologist. He's Dr. Robbie Kroger too. I mean, he's very well trained. He's one of our nation's foremost experts. You know, it's the thing that keeps me up at night, worried about how do we protect? There's no cure. I mean, that's the problem. There is no cure. You know, we're seeing this already in certain parts of the state. A new case found in Tunica County last week, or it was announced last week anyway. You know, but besides just the scientific problems of this disease running rampant throughout our population, you know, if I go back and I look at a lot of what, you know, you mentioned Boone and Crockett Club, it's about fair chase hunting. Fair chase hunting began in 1902 in the South Delta in Mississippi when Theodore Roosevelt refused to shoot a tied up bear. Whether you're refusing to shoot a tied up bear or you're refusing to shoot a deer that's in a fence that has an ear tag, and you look in a catalog and say, I want number 47, you know, that's not what hunting is about. Hunting is about an experience. It's about getting to know. We've got, you know, Boone and Crockett, one of our great members is Donald Trump Jr., you know, and one of the things that he really enjoys is it's not just about the hunt, it's about the experience. And I think we're losing that here in this argument.
I think that's a great point. Hey, lastly, I said Texas is a mess. Texas is a mess. People might cite Texas as a great example of high fence hunting, but it's a mess, isn't it, buddy?
It's a total mess. And, you know, look, I don't want Mississippi to be like Texas. You know, Nevada has things. I don't want Mississippi to be like Nevada. You know, we've got to do things in this state that make Mississippi better than everybody else. And we need to learn from our mistakes, whether it's things we've done in Mississippi or things that Texans or other states have done. We need to use that to our advantage and guard ourselves of how we can protect our deer, how can we protect an economy, and how can we protect our citizens that enjoy hunting.
Wildlife belongs to the people. That's at the core of the North American conservation model that Aldo Leopold brought to America. And Mississippi is the capital of the outdoors in America because we have stood by that. Let's not let a few rich, high-fence deer breeders who want to become deer kings stop that because they're politically connected. Please, please pay close attention to this issue. Do your own homework. Go study the Supreme Court rulings in Texas and other states and see what a mess it is when you open up this Pandora's box. Okay, we're going to shift gears. James, you've been working hard on the Farm Bill. That's so important to Mississippi within the context of the Outdoor Stewardship Trust Fund. We're talking about having millions and millions of dollars available to Mississippi and really every state in the nation. But this is so important, isn't it?
It totally is. And if you look at Mississippi, we're almost 90% private land. You know, we've got a number of different public areas, but we're a private land state. Having a very robust farm bill, the farm bill spends $6 billion a year on conservation. If I look at for example, wetland reserve, if you look at the entire Southeast in terms of land enrolled in the conservation reserve program, 1/3 of all Southeastern states is in Mississippi. Of the 1/3 of all that dollars that are spent is in the state of Mississippi. Big economic impact, big conservation impact. Wetland reserve, I mean, 250,000 acres in waterfowl habitat in Mississippi alone. And we've been fortunate, you know, I miss Senator Cochran every day, and what a champion he was in terms of really bringing up good farm bill programs. And I can tell you, Trent Kelly is following along in his footsteps. He just is in the process of dropping a new bill called a forest conservation easement program that will really help. I mean, what he saw was in the Pacific Northwest, the spotted owl, and he said, we don't need that hurting our timber industry in Mississippi. And so he's trying to put together a program that we can work toward improving populations, improving species, and do it in a very pro-private property rights, voluntary, incentive-based manner that we tend to do very well at participating in here.
Hey, James, I had a real good conversation last week, actually, with Lieutenant Governor David Hosemann about his intention. The last year they were able to do 10 million. The intention this year is to do 20 million, and we discussed that. And I've had continuing conversations with other leaders in the legislature. I think there's growing agreement that we've got to have a dedicated funding source, that we got to get legislators aligned around it. But I think the most important one is this: that since the Farm Bill could really fund some pretty significant projects that could be multi-year. Because you don't have a dedicated funding source and because you can't be sure what's coming next year, it's hard to really commit to projects that might go over 2 or 3 or 4 years. We need to be able to do that. And the kind of matching dollars that we're talking about putting with that from the federal standpoint, James, right now we're looking at about $2 for every dollar we spend. That's what the current experience is in terms of programs that are being analyzed by the Stewardship Trust Fund, which I think is terrific. But we could put that on steroids on the federal level. We need a dedicated funding source for many reasons, but that's one of the good reasons, isn't it?
We totally do. And if you look at states, and first off, I want to commend Lieutenant Governor Hosemann. I mean, his work on the Outdoor Stewardship Trust Fund went above and beyond, and I certainly appreciate his hard work there, and trying to make sure we end up with 20 million. As I understand it, we had 50 million in applications, so I don't think it's going to be a problem putting the money to good use. And I'll give you an example. One project that uses federal funds is protecting a lot of Jackson's drinking water, their watershed. And according to the Environmental Protection Agency, for every $1 we spend on source water protection, you spend $27 on water treatment savings. So, hey, look, this is good conservative conservation. This makes good sense.
Hey, James, we're out of time for today, but what I want to do, we'll get you back in the next couple of weeks, and we'll really bore down on how this thing is evolving, your involvement in it. It's exciting to see that it's going to potentially get reauthorized with significantly more dollars that could benefit Mississippi. This has been James Cummings from Wildlife Mississippi. When we come back, we're going to be talking turkey. We'll see you after this.
Mississippi.
Welcome back to Super Talk Outdoors. Man, I really enjoyed that conversation with James Cummings. We're so lucky to have someone like him who's literally written the book on conservation in North America here in Mississippi. His leadership of Wildlife Mississippi is so important, and he's the current president of the Boone and Crockett Club. So his national voice is very substantial. And I'll remind you those two quotes that I said at the beginning. The first one by Nancy Newell: "Conversation is humanity caring about the future." And I quote my friend Haley Barber. One of the things he said after Hurricane Katrina, he said, "What will our kids and our kids' kids say of us? Will they say we got it right?" And this was about the rebuilding effort and all the work that we had to do to bring coastal Mississippi back. This white-tailed deer issue and others like it are just like that. They're generational issues. And what will our kids and our kids' kids say of us? Will they say that we protected wildlife ownership and that we understood that the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks needed to be the central arbiter of the management of wildlife in the state? I think we're going to end up there. But that's important. And this last quote, the second quote that I shared at the beginning of the show from Aldo Leopold: "Conservation is a state of harmony between men and land. We are out of harmony right now because of efforts to make the sale of white-tailed deer legal in this state. But we'll get it back in harmony again. But we just all got to work together on that issue." Now let's shift gears and move over to my friend Adam Butler, who's the Wild Turkey Program Coordinator for the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks. He's a good friend of this show, someone I really enjoy spending time with. And we got turkey season coming up, and Adam and I are going to chat about it. How you doing, my friend?
Oh, it's that week, that week where everybody catches a cold or has to call into work, or, you put a lot of strain on the family and the boss. We need to come in a little late some mornings. It's here.
Well, what's cool? There's a kind of a buildup, and social media kind of gives this to you. I watch my friends, people like Lake Pickle and Jordan Blissett from the Primos team. They go to another state and they turkey hunt and they have great success. And I watch Cuz Strickland, who went down to Florida with a veterans effort that he's been involved with year after year, and they're posting great pictures of veterans with their turkeys, etc. But it starts to get people kind of excited. These guys, man, they are addicted. I mean, it is. If there's an addiction, if this is turkey hunting is their addiction. The way they talk about it, the way they have this relationship with the turkey. I recall my time with Will Primos, who's been on the show several times. He's such a dear friend. But when Will talks about turkey hunting, it is literally a religious experience. He feels like he doesn't need to pray, because in the moment he feels like he is literally in a prayer in the moment. But you
I've probably said it on the show before, but my wife calls it a cult. She says all of us crazy turkey hunters we're all members of a cult together.
Hey man, I get it. I get it.
It's so weird. I've got friends that I may not talk to, a handful of times throughout the year, but I'm going to talk to them every single day during turkey season, just to kind of rehash what happened this morning and how the old bird beat me this time and what the game plan for tomorrow might be. So it's definitely special, and it's, all hunting is special. All outdoor memories are special, but you're right in that turkey hunting sure does get into people's blood and become something pretty powerful in their life,
Hey, listen, I want to tell you a quick story. My son Jordan he loves to turkey hunt, and when he was at law school at Ole Miss, he would do a lot of hunting on public land, and he had, I think I've mentioned to you before, one particular turkey he pursued for days and days and days. He never shot the turkey, but he said it was his best turkey hunts he's ever been on, as he went up and down these ridges, and it was just he'd get there at 3:00 in the morning and be able to get to where he wanted to go, and then he would go to law school after he finished his hunt. But he loves to hunt, and we had a place that we leased, or we were a member of a club in Meridian at one point. One son was at Auburn, one was at Ole Miss, and this was a great place for us to meet, and we would turkey hunt together. And I had so much fun going with him on these turkey hunts as he had this conversation with turkeys. Well, anyway, a few years ago, not long, I'd say maybe 4 or 5 years ago, Jordan and I went up to Walnut, Mississippi, right there on the Tennessee line. Yeah. At my friend Al Hopkins, who unfortunately just passed away. God, what a beautiful, amazing man he was. Al Hopkins, just a special, special man. But I killed my first turkey on his farm up there, and it was literally epic. And I can get why people, once they have had this conversation and it culminates with shooting the turkey, and then you get to eat those breasts and the camaraderie around it, I get why people get hooked to it. And it's literally a lifelong quest, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it's it's one of the few things in my life that just never changes. Every year, spring season it means the same thing to me today that it did 20 years ago, and I'm sure 20 years in the future it will too. Hopefully, if we have abundant turkeys in the future, which is something that I wake up thinking about every day. So it's special, and Mississippi, Mississippi is a special place in the turkey hunting world for a lot of the reasons that you talk about. We get picked on about a lot of things, but if you look at kind of the hunting and outdoor industry, and specifically turkey within that, we are way overrepresented at the national level. People recognize that Mississippi is a blue chip state in the turkey hunting arena, and we've got really, really deep roots in that tradition.
I had Cuz Strickland and Daniel Hayes on my show just a couple of weeks ago from Mossy Oaks, and we had a terrific conversation. But their Mr. Fox turkey vests sold at the National Wild Turkey Federation annual meeting at the auction for $31,000,
wow.
Man. $31,000. Yeah.
I was up there. So I was up there at the NWTF convention, and I saw, I guess it was maybe the second day, I saw Cuz Strickland and pulled him aside, and I asked him how, they were selling off a certain number of those vests up there, and I asked him about it, and he told me that the vests went on sale, I think at 10 o'clock in the morning, and they had people lined up at 7 p.m. the night before to be the first in line.
Isn't that something?
Crazy. Yeah.
And, I saw a video in the last couple of days where Toxie said they're going to do one more run to give people an opportunity to have that vest. If you ultimately get a copy of that vest, it's going to be quite a keepsake. But it speaks to Mr. Fox, Toxie's father, and this legacy that he's leaving behind for Toxie and his grandsons. And we had an opportunity to chat about that a little bit. And it was, again, Muncie Oaks is in the state of Mississippi. Primos is, started in Mississippi as well, and all these other Mississippi companies. But those in particular that center around that turkey hunting has such a big part of who they are. They are the ultimate ambassadors for this state when you talk about presenting Mississippi as the capital of the outdoors, aren't they?
Absolutely, and I've heard from both of those gentlemen who started those companies, were it not for turkey hunting, their companies would probably not exist. They're bigger than turkey hunting now, but were it not for turkey hunting in the beginning, that was what sparked their entrepreneurial spirit going down those lines. So yeah, it's special. We have it's a special bird. It's a special tradition, and Mississippi's a special place for it, no doubt.
It is. What again? There are other states that can claim great turkey hunting, but one of the incredible, awesome dimensions of hunting in Mississippi is the turkey hunting. What makes Mississippi so darn good?
Well, a lot of things. I think one. I'll give you a particular one. You quoted Aldo Leopold just a little bit ago at the beginning of this segment, and Aldo, he was from the upper Midwest, but he came here in the 1920s and assessed. He wanted to see if some of his theories that he had that in practice in the Midwest applied to the Southeast, applied to other parts of the country. And for whatever reason, he chose Mississippi to come do an assessment. And all the way back in 1928 in his report, he states that in no state that he had visited had he found more potential for abundant wild turkey populations as compared to Mississippi. So even, almost a full century ago, people were recognizing that our state, had the unique types of habitats and environments that were going to be good for turkey. And then, we were one of the earliest states to really undertake the restoration of wild turkey. If you look at the agency that I worked for, which was the Game and Fish Commission, when it was first established, right out of the gate, when the legislature created our agency in 1932, restoration of the wild turkey was a top priority. And so we undertook that a lot earlier than a lot of the rest of the country did. And because of that, we've had turkey populations, huntable turkey populations here, much longer than a lot of other states have had. And so I think that has allowed sort of that fertile ground for that deep tradition that we have here. So many passionate people, so much interest in it, and then all the offshoots of that, like some of the companies that you've named that are centered around turkey hunting, or at least were founded kind of around turkey hunting. So we've got a lot to be proud of when it comes to the bird.
For Aldo Leopold, the father of the North American conservation model, to have Mississippi as sort of the center of his research and his proclamation that the wildlife belonged to the people and we better manage it accordingly. Boy, Mississippi's got its place in history as it relates to that. Hey, when we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Adam Butler from the Turkey Program at the Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks. As you can tell, it's always a great conversation. We'll see you after this break.
Whistling that sweet soul for him. I said 3 Mississippi to this land called home. I'll breathe Mississippi till I'm dead and gone. Just carry on, I'll carry on, Mississippi.
We live in one of the best places in America to enjoy the outdoors. So let's talk about it. It's Super Talk Outdoors with Ricky Matthews on Super Talk Mississippi.
Welcome back to Super Talk Outdoors. You're talking about a show today jam-packed with stuff you better listen to, or maybe you want to listen to, enjoy listening to. This part of the conversation is with Adam Butler from the Wild Turkey Program at the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks is one of them. It's always interesting. We always have fun chats during the breaks, and this hour here has been an hour that the foundation has been involved with for the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks for a number of years. And about in October, a little over a year ago, we changed the name to Super Talk Outdoors. I came in as the host a former newspaper publisher, someone who loves the outdoors. I hunt and fish, have a place up in the Mississippi Delta, live on the water in Biloxi. I'm so passionate. I'm extremely independent, which gives me, I think, a wonderful voice and the more controversial things that we might talk about. But Adam and I were chatting about how, this long history that the department's had, not only with this show, but just in general, the importance of public outreach and communicating with the public and keeping people fired up and educated about why it's important to take conservation so seriously. Adam in particular, because I've had the opportunity to meet so many wonderful people in the department. I respect them all. They're all great communicators. But I always enjoy when we're talking about wild turkeys. I want to talk to Adam because he's so well connected and so passionate about what he's doing, and he's also a great communicator. Did that come natural to you, Adam?
I don't really know. Like I was telling you over the break, I made up my mind when I was probably a teenager that I wanted to be a biologist, and I just assumed that meant you stay out in the woods all the time, playing with animals and tagging them or whatever you do, and it worked out for me that I grew up a Mississippi State fan, and as it turns out, Mississippi State has one of the more well-respected wildlife science programs in the United States. So that worked out really good for me. But I remember going to Mississippi State, majoring in wildlife, and had to take a speech class pretty early on, and I remember thinking, why in the world, I'm going to be a biologist. Why am I taking a speech class? And as it turns out, that is a skill set that it has become pretty, it's become pretty important in my job. And I think, it goes back to like what you're talking about. So many people in our state are passionate about wildlife. They're interested in it. They want to know more about it. And a lot of times, biologists like myself, we're introverted. We want to be out in the woods. We don't want to have to be in front of a crowd, but it is important. So I don't know if it came natural or if I've acquired it over time, but I think it is important to be able to communicate, because people cherish these things so much. You want to be able to identify with them and make sure we're all kind of pulling weight together to try to ensure that these turkeys and deer and ducks and everything else are going to be around 100 years from now.
Yeah, generational work, like I said. Adam, one of the cool things about first of all, you're a great communicator, but I think it's important for people to understand that the role that you play in helping people understand why conservation is important, why the work of the wild turkey program is important. One of the things that's important is the fact that you're talking to a larger group of people, because during the pandemic, more people found turkey hunting, more people found duck hunting, more people found white-tailed deer hunting. But it's true. I mean, the people who want to enjoy turkey hunting, something about the pandemic and knowing that we were safe outside, people got reintroduced to the outdoors in ways. And I bet you hear that all the time, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we've got really good numbers on that. And it wasn't just hunting. It was all outdoor activities, camping, fishing, canoeing. I mean, everything, hiking, you name it. Nationwide, there was a huge upsurge in outdoor activities. And that's a good thing. I mean, ultimately, it's a good thing because, just speaking for myself, being connected with nature and the outdoors is like the most rewarding part of my life. And it's kind of like my center, like when things get stressful or I get out of whack, spending a little time in the woods brings it all back into harmony for me. And so that's good that a lot of people, now have that outlet that maybe didn't before. From a resource management standpoint, it does bring challenges. We've got data that has showed the number of turkey hunters in Mississippi has almost doubled in the last decade, which, on the one hand is good because you got that much interest in the bird, and that means more people wanting to conserve it and all that. But it is putting a lot more demand on a resource that's probably not growing, and so that's a challenge to try to balance those two things.
Hey, when you went to the National Wild Turkey Federation annual meeting, is this a common theme across all the states of America?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, especially in the Southeast, most Southeastern states are not really seeing turkey populations growing anymore. There's a couple. North Carolina's still seeing some growth. There's a few others, but by and large, populations are stabilized to decreasing, but the number of people interested is not decreasing. And so that's common common talking point when the group of biologists get together.
Adam Butler, Wild Turkey Program Coordinator for the Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks. We'll come back to you in a few weeks and check in and see how the turkey season is going so far.
Absolutely.
This has been a great show today. I want to thank you for listening. And as I always say, stay safe. Stay safe when you're in the outdoors. God bless you, and we will see you next week.
I said 3 Mississippi to this land called home.